Welcome to Kingdom Coffee. Let's talk about that. I have Greg back. It's been kind of fun. Now we're starting to bring people back to go deeper into some of these subjects. And I have been enjoying getting to know Greg. And he's very apostolic to the body of Christ, helping to strategize kingdom living. And he just really has a heart for the body at large and for God, of course, and wants to see God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. And I believe he has some strategy for this new wineskin that we've all been hearing about. Well, at least many of us. So we are going to be talking about kind of building up prophetic teams, apostolic networks. We're just going to kind of go back and forth and see what the Lord does. So you're in for a treat. Greg, would you like to go ahead and just start with what kind of brought you to this point?
Okay, what brought me? Well, and I'm going to start out by saying, yeah, you say you see me more as apostolic. Actually, the Lord spoke to me and said, don't call yourself an apostle, because I am more in it's more the prophetic ministry, but it's not incorrect to say I'm doing apostolic stuff.
Yes, that's what I see.
So I'm doing apostolic stuff, but my primary work is prophetic stuff, listening to the Lord and then helping others who will actually implement it to actually do more of the building, which is more of an apostolic thing. But yeah, part of my work, it's part apostolic in the fact that I'm helping to implement things with people that I believe are actually more apostolically anointed to do it. And then I focus just more on the consulting, being the strategist. Which
actually, pause you there, is a great kind of discussion to go further into, because, I'm still learning as well. I'm starting to see what is on people's lives. But then, God told you it's not specifically apostolic, but I'm seeing apostolic. So it's kind of fun just to learn about that too.
Well, and I think it is too. Just as another thing, because, we all want to put people in their categories. I do too. Mm-hmm. And, one group of people, I may be teaching a lot in front of them. Then they say, well, you're really a teacher. Mm. And then another people, all I'm doing is giving a bunch of words to, when I'm out, especially in the mission field, praying for people and giving words. Then I'm like a prophet. Mm-hmm. And then I come around here in Oregon, and I'm working with people that are really help implementing the thing the Lord showed me years ago, which I'll talk about a little bit.
So you're a chameleon.
Yeah, and to tell you the truth. Yeah, well, this goes back, and I'll give just a little reroute. I talked about a little bit on our first talk, but most everybody I've got to know isn't just one calling.
Right.
There is certain people that I've been around that, okay, you're just really just that one thing.
Right, yeah.
But most people are some mix one way or another, depending how God wants to use this. And every person is unique.
Right.
And that's also what the Lord's trying to do, is get us back to 100% uniqueness.
Right.
Instead of just
the diversity.
Instead
of
putting us in our,
I love that.
In the silos that maybe other ministers want to put us in just to fulfill what they need to do. He wants us all to realize how unique we are. So I'll go back and just explain a little bit about how I got to where I am now. When I really gave my life to the Lord as an engineer, and he pulled me out and said, okay, now I want you to go out. And I thought, I'm an evangelist. So that was my whole thing, is how am I going to work as an evangelist wherever he sends me? So, which I would call my second calling, actually, next to more prophet, then evangelist, and then probably apostolic.
Okay, interesting.
Even though other people would categorize me as teaching.
Yeah.
But I look at it as more like the evangelist is more a publicist. It's just
right. Right. I've seen that too. And then just to add that, I just remembered a lot of the apostles tend to have all 5 tendencies. Right.
Yeah.
So that's more confirming my idea of you.
Well, yeah, and I tend to see that more. I don't think it's something necessarily biblical.
It's not set in stone.
but I do think just because of the apostles' work, because he's having to implement things, and he has to be the first one to come in to build things. So he's got it. From my perspective, he has to have more of all the pieces.
Yeah, that makes sense.
to get things going before the other ministries, other functions join
Right.
him.
Yeah, I could see that.
So I go out, first place El Salvador. I'm thinking, what am I here? I can't even speak Spanish at that point.
Right, that's wild.
But it's like, how can I be evangelist here? And it was a little bit before that time the Lord was, I had a major experience. We said, I've called you as a prophet to the nations.
So cool.
And so this is part of why I keep going back to really my work's mainly prophetic. And I've realized I was doing that even before I gave my life to the Lord as an engineer.
Very cool.
I was a design engineer. I got several patents, which I don't believe now looking back, it was God that was giving me that. Wow. So even though I wasn't really serving him, we're called to something whether we're serving him with it or not.
Totally agree. Yes.
And so I just finally got to the point where I realized where it was coming from, where these revelations are coming from.
Yeah, that's so cool.
But it still took me a while to really learn because every prophet, every calling really is misunderstood from what I've learned. None of them are exactly what the Bible really means when it uses those terms.
That. Right.
So prophets, so prophets definitely one that's not, I don't think in the past it wasn't thought of in the proper way and wasn't thought of well, but it's a huge, vast, wide function. And that's another thing the Lord showed me. Functions are not positions. They're not even really, don't think of it as offices. Think of them as functions. Yeah. Yeah. So I think most all the functions are misunderstood, including pastor. I think that's one of the most misunderstood ones of all, just because of what we've called pastor for so many decades or centuries.
Yes.
But anyway, so as he sent me out, and it's like after 3 days in El Salvador, I'm going, I can't be an evangelist here. What am I doing? And then I hear this audible voice. It was closest thing to an audible voice I've ever heard. I've probably heard it 2 or 3 times. I've called you to unify my body. So I tried doing that for about 4 years between El Salvador and Argentina. And there'd be some success while I was there going to different churches working with pastors. But as soon as I leave, they'd all go back into their own corners. And then the Lord was really giving me more and more words. I could hear him better and better. I'd go and give these words to different people. And it was very clear, some of them, like, this is exactly what you're supposed to do. And others would even say, yeah, that's what they need to do. But the pastor wouldn't change. So then I got really kind of angry, upset at the pastors. It's like, they're the problem. And then one day, and I was saying, Lord, okay, I've given them clear words. So why do you let them continue when they're not doing anything that your prophet, your messenger gives them? Right. And then he showed me that it's because they're not held accountable just because one person came up and said, this is what you're supposed to do. That biblically, the prophets are we are all not really held accountable until we've got some other confirmations from God. And that's, when I was blaming the pastors one day, he showed me it's not the pastors, it's the prophets are the problem. And here I'm thinking, what? And then he brought me through the steps to show me that the prophets are supposed to be working together more than any other calling. And then I went to the Bible and found out, yes, that's truly the case. They're supposed to work together more than any other calling, and they have since through the Old Testament and the New, that they're the ones that need each other more than anybody else, but have been convinced that they're the loners. Right. That's definitely been a scheme of the enemy, like isolate. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. So, which, that's really the scheme of the enemy, like you said, to isolate us. We can't work well isolated. The Lord made us to work as one big happy family. Yeah. And I believe the prophets are the ones that most need to work together because they're the ones that are pushing the limit on this thing that's outside the comfort zone. So they're going to draw the most persecution. That's just because of their calling. And I know that the Lord told you that it was the prophet's fault. But I'm curious if there was more to that too, as far as like, I still kind of think it's both. Like, definitely we don't blame the pastors that it's all their fault. Right. But I think, personally, in my experience, that pastors
could be a lot more accepting and working with, and iron sharpening iron. But I feel like it kind of turned more into, have you seen the Disney cartoon Encanto?
I haven't seen that
You
one
should
yet.
see it. But they say we don't talk about Bruno because Bruno is the prophet in the family, one of the prophets. It's very symbolic. It's
Really?
very, very interesting. But it really makes me think of that. We have closeted the prophets because they're weird, they're out there,
right.
They're hard to understand, they're strange, whatever.
Yeah, so, in fact, I got that nickname in a fraternity. The fraternity is like, they put it on my cup, Dare to be Weird. I got him to change it. so God was using me in the prophetic all the time, but I just didn't know.
Yep.
And
me too.
So now, and working with more and more different prophets, working more as a team, I've realized what a blessing it is to work with other prophetic people. Because most other people don't understand the people that are looking outside the box.
Right.
And the prophets are probably the hardest to work with each other because they've all got their thing that they're looking outside the box in, where the other prophets don't have that revelation.
That's true.
So actually, that's part of the reason they have to work a lot together, so that they can, that iron sharpen iron thing has to occur really to get to the point that they can give a clear message and and they have to stick together, number one, to do it.
Yeah, the unity again.
Right.
It's so powerful.
But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the pastors, there's no doubt, it's like all of our callings, no matter what we're doing, we can use an excuse of, well, I can't survive unless I do this and that. And so we take shortcuts.
Right.
So I'd say a good percentage of the pastors had taken that shortcut really rather than doing the right thing. But what the Lord really showed me is it is the system, the structure of the church that's out of order still.
Yes, that's what I'm starting to see. Right.
And it's the prophet's responsibility to get it in order. Working with the more apostolic, building that order, helping build it. But the prophets have to point first what we need to do. They're the social strategist. If there's any two words we could sum up to what is a prophet, I'd say it's a social strategist. I mean, I got that from somebody that's really, really, really studied the Old Testament and the New and what prophets are doing.
Yeah, you said that before, and that was the first time I had heard that for prophet. So I thought that's kind of neat. And this morning, I just read that the foundation of the church should be built on the apostles and the prophets and Jesus Christ as the cornerstone. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we've thrown it. So whenever you throw out the apostles and prophets, you're throwing out the foundation.
Right. And that's kind of tipsy.
Right. As we know, any structure is going to have major problems in the long run if the foundation's not solid.
Right.
So that's why he was pointing it. It's like the prophets and apostles, regardless of whether anybody receives them, need to work together. But the more they work together and do things biblically, the more they'll be received.
Yeah.
Because I've seen incredible revelation come when you have several prophets all working together, honing the message down. Then they get received by these people that wouldn't receive them before.
Yeah. There's that accountability, I guess, and then just the confirmation and even the testimony that they're able to get along.
Right. Yeah, that's huge. I mean, so I don't blame what people don't receive the prophets right now because they seem disjointed. They give things that hasn't been smoothed down, hasn't been, I guess, sifted and sorted is what I call it. Mm-hmm. If you sift and sort with other people, then you really get down to the core of what God's really saying, and you don't make others have to try to interpret it.
Right, right.
Now, surely there's definitely still a lot that God doesn't want you to know exactly what it means and wants the receiver, but he wants you to hone it down enough so at least they can make a clear interpretation of exactly what it means.
And I feel like Dan McCollum has done a really good job. Have you heard him?
I have read some of his stuff, but I just don't.
He talks a lot about that, like making it to where someone can receive it. And he really, I feel like he's done a really good job at equipping people to understand the prophetic a lot more in a palatable way. Not like watering it down so that you give a watered down word, but understanding where you're missing each other, and like it's actually sometimes just a language barrier, language of the prophetic, and
right.
trying to reach someone where they're at.
Well, yeah, it's good you said that, because I can tell you, I've been saying this late, telling people, if it wasn't for misunderstanding of language and traditions that are in place now, my work would be really easy.
Right.
That's 90 to 95% of my work is actually trying to get past what's been built up in definitions of words and traditions over the maybe centuries that God's trying to correct.
That's so true. Yeah, because the word you are meaning or thinking is so clear is triggering this person, and you have no idea because they have this translation of that word.
Exactly. No, and that's mainly what I've dealt with. I mean, that's really why the Lord had me out there really ministering in several different countries after El Salvador, Argentina, and most of it was just learning how to deliver pieces of the information that he showed me about how we're supposed to be working as the 5 ministries together.
Yeah,
it was all learning how to communicate it.
Wow.
So he had me in a long process of really learning how to communicate well, so I could realize what I need to do to help the people.
Yeah, that's
understand.
Good. Yeah, I think I didn't realize how much that was a huge factor. Because being a prophet, being efficient, being in a hurry, I was like, why should I guess I always felt people were wanting me to water it down, or like that to change what God showed me, but I've begun to understand it a lot more, and I didn't know how challenging that process would be, like learning the language, and learning to be clear, learning obedience to God, not fear of man, but speaking to their heart, reaching them.
Right, just learning how to communicate better.
Yeah.
Because as I repeat over and over, it's like there's not much more important than communication, because that's what unifies us.
Yeah.
If we didn't have communication, we could never be unified.
Right. So in some ways, sometimes I was practically speaking tongues to them. What good does that do? Yeah. We've heard that scripture.
Yep.
Okay. So get you back on track. Sorry, I pulled
you off
on a bunny trail.
It's always good to get me back on track.
Well, I kind of pulled you.
So yeah, well, I mean, that was all good stuff.
Yeah, good foundation.
All relating to what really I'm communicating now at this point, and working with others that are actually implementing it more and more. And that's the blessing. Is before is mainly just, okay, I know what you want, Lord, but you got to connect me with some people that will actually understand it, number one, and then move and do it,
implement it. Right.
So the great thing is now I went from doors closed everywhere to even really listen to this stuff because it didn't line up with our doctrine now, to now there is doors open everywhere because they know there's something more we need to do.
That's exciting.
Yeah, because there's more and more voices just like mine that are trying to show this new thing, and the prophets are working more and more together.
Yeah. Which
is amazing. I mean, even 20 years ago, there was like, okay, there might be 2 or 3 prophets in the country that people know of, and maybe somebody knows somebody in the community. But once I'll read this verse from 1 Corinthians 14, 26, this section of scripture that really talks about how we need to work together. So 1 Corinthians 14:26 says, "How is it then, brethren, whenever you come together, each of you has a psalm, has a teaching, has a tongue, has a revelation, has an interpretation. Let all things be done for edification. If anyone speaks any tongue, let there be 2 or at the most 3, each in turn, and let one interpret. But if there is no interpreter, let him keep silent in church and let him speak to himself and to God. Let 2 or 3 prophets speak, and let the others judge. But if anything is revealed to another who sits by, let the first keep silent. For you can all prophesy one by one, that all may learn and all may be encouraged. And the spirit of the prophets are subject to the prophets. For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all the churches of the saints."
Yes. So wait, more than one prophet in the church?
And this is just a small group.
Right.
So it's saying, whenever you come together, let 2 or 3 prophets speak.
Yeah.
And then it's saying, and there may be another one there, and there may be several, but it's acting like, well, you'll always find at least 2 or 3 prophets in every group of believers gathering. And back then, the gatherings weren't near as big as our gatherings on average.
Right.
I mean, they were all house gatherings back then. So when Paul's writing this, it's like, you might have a gathering of 100 people.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that's probably going to be a big gathering. So in that 100 people, there's at least 2 or 3 prophets there. And so that's, in the first years of my really submitting to God's direction in my life, I would read sections like this and go, well, we can't really do that in today's church. Instead of saying, well, why can't we do that in today's church? It's just passing over it. Well, yeah, that's not really going to work.
Right,
that'd have to be a little group that's not really a church thing.
Well, it must have been for then.
But in reality, it's like, okay, if these things worked back then, but they don't seem to work in our system now, well, maybe it's our structure system we need to change.
Yeah. And on that note, before we start getting into the prophetic team stuff, what do you think of the body right now, the church model? Like, do you think it should be done away with completely? Or tell me your thoughts on...
Well,
let's talk about
that's a loaded question. Like everything, there's always good parts to things.
Right.
So God is still working in everything that still exists out there.
Agree. Yeah.
He's still working there. And that's one of the things I went from, okay, well, you showed me all this. So should I be trying to get churches to change? Or should I just go working with people that are willing to move into this next thing? And that's what he showed me.
Okay.
Is don't spend your time, waste your time on trying to change what exists already.
Yes.
Just go and do the new thing. Right. And I know a lot of people have.
Right.
And you actually get pushed out more and not receive more because you're actually doing something I don't think the Lord really wants us to focus on anyway.
Yeah.
The prophetic's supposed to look at what needs to be built and help the more apostolic people build it rather than go change. Sure, he stations his prophets even in what I'd call the deadest churches. He'll still put people in there to try to help them move forward because he never gives up on anybody. But overall, just because I know how things are supposed to work, from what he's shown me and what I read in the Bible, it's like I do believe there's a better way. And every time I work with people in small groups, they tend to be people that are actually getting stronger quicker.
Right. Yeah. I'm finding that too.
Because they can't just be spectators.
Yes. And they realize that there is so much more than that because it's almost like you're under this spell. I mean, that you just think this is the only way that it is, and like I need to be fed, like that I can't feed myself. And I'm not saying that's everyone, but it's like it was really surprising to me to see that in some people. Like, well, wouldn't you want to step out in this or like do this? Or and some people, like even during the whole pandemic, it was almost like I just want everything to go back to normal, back to exactly how it was before, and I was like, really? What?
Yeah, and God really used that to help us get outside the box.
To stir up things.
Right.
That's where I get excited. Other people don't want to do that. And that's not always bad. I understand that. Like there's settlers and then there's pioneers.
Right.
So I know there's...
The prophets and people with more of that function are definitely the ones called most to try to build the new thing.
Right.
Along with the apostolic people. So, but that does remind me, I can say something else going back to really when I was still working, trying to get the churches to unify, before he showed me it's not really going to happen until we get this apostolic prophetic base foundation back in place.
Yeah.
Is that, when I said I was blaming the pastors, but then I would really look at things and go, yeah, but the pastors couldn't get away with doing what they're doing if the people weren't complacent and just sitting back and they're happy with letting Moses speak.
Right.
A good percentage of them. Because it's a good excuse to not do anything. It's like, well, that's not our place. We just go live our lives and go listen to the pastor, and that's our work.
Right.
And it's not. We're all supposed to be ministers biblically.
Yeah. And I think the enemy kind of loves that.
Totally. No, he loves to take out as many people.
Yeah, no,
set them in the sidelines as possible.
Just keep doing that.
Right.
Good job.
Yeah. So, and that's the way I look at it, is that the enemy just is, he's happy as long as we're staying in the box.
Right.
Because we're pretty safe there.
Yeah.
It's when we get outside the box, doing the new thing under God's power, under his spirit, is when we get dangerous to the enemy. Because he's not afraid of us by ourselves. He's only afraid of the Spirit of God.
Yeah.
So the only way he can really be brought down, and he knows it, is when we are walking in the path that the Lord is showing us to walk in.
Mature sons and daughters, then we're really full of the glory.
Yeah.
Probably since 2018 is when God started stirring me. So you've been in this, way longer, experienced a lot of things. So it's fun to come alongside you and to have you come alongside me. But what I'm feeling like I'm seeing is, it's not that the church has been all wrong and that they've done it all wrong. There's definitely good aspects. And I gained things from going to church, and I needed that in the beginning. I almost feel like the model that we have now is like, hopefully people don't take it as an insult, but it's like level 1. Here's the beginning, get used to this, get accountability, get close to people that are Christians, brothers and sisters, learn how to kind of have a consistent lifestyle of Christianity. Here's things to build you up. Here's each other to come alongside one another. And then I just feel like many churches camped there.
Right.
And they didn't want to go to the next level. And I kept looking for the next level in different churches, trying out different churches. And it felt like it kept being the same thing, similar. Right. Some a little different, some, whatever. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, is it's like, it's your first entry point. And then there's more after that.
Yeah, and it's a great entry point. That's why, I can, I just got to telling somebody that yesterday that just came to the Lord recently, that when they were saying, well, should we go to the church, this church? I said, if you really feel like you're getting something there, I said, just stay there and get everything, and just keep praying. Well, is there any point we're supposed to move to something else?
Yeah.
Because that's what he did with me. He took me all over. It wasn't because the other ones were bad. It's just because he needed me
exactly.
to learn some new things.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And I remember being at one church, and I was just like so hungry for something more. And I was feeling guilty because I'm like, this is my church. I shouldn't be looking elsewhere, because there's that whole stigma. You're not supposed to go check out other churches.
I call that the doctrine of demons. It says you can only stay in your,
I agree. Oh my
in your
gosh.
church.
So the Lord gave me permission. I didn't know I had permission to go to other watering holes. That's what I called it. Right. And so I would, and I was so happy. That was kind of like my first breaking out.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, I can.
You felt so guilty.
Yes, I did. And that was sad, because that should not be. I liked this one saying, like, it's okay to be friends with someone who leaves your church. We're in the church of God, not gangs.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's like different gangs fighting each other. Yeah, and a lot of it. I mean, there's always, it's like we have a saying in the world, follow the money. If you want to see why maybe things are messed up or seem corrupt.
So sad.
Well, the system we have now really makes it tough for churches, I call them fellowship churches, that pastors are trying to run to really minister to the people, care for the people. The Lord, it's because there's only a certain amount of resources in those groups. But I can tell you, by working with apostolic people, especially apostolic business people for the last few years, I believe that 90 to 95% of all the resources in the body of Christ are in the hands of the apostolic people, which I believe is the biblical model.
Interesting.
So it's one more reason that even if the pastors want to fight this now because it doesn't go along with what their denominations taught when they're going through seminary or whatever, Bible school back in earlier years, in the long run, I believe the pastors are going to benefit more than anybody else. If they allow this,
no more burnout.
Right. If they allow the apostolic foundation and then recognize the apostolic people more, they're holding funds that the Lord wants to funnel to the pastors, so they don't have to think about their resources as much.
That's good.
Which kind of keeps those walls of separation in between those fellowship churches right now. It's because they know they're gonna, if they get together with other churches, they may lose a lot of their people, which is tied to the resources.
Yeah, I think that's a sticky place to be. Yeah, it would be hard to find the balance in that.
Yeah, apostles and prophets are the most kingdom-focused people.
Okay.
And so because of that, they're not, it's not because, once again, it's not because the pastors have done the wrong thing. They are assigned to groups of people.
Definitely.
The apostles and prophets aren't. They're assigned more as an overall, what do you want to do in this area, Lord? So, especially the apostolic, what do you want to do in the area? So they have a real kingdom focus, looking at multiple fellowships, pastor.
That's kind of cool. I didn't think about that. Just that, not being necessarily called to one group, but more of an overarching, the kingdom.
Right.
And the house of God at large, which I have felt that many times, getting words for like the body at large, and then just praying into that oftentimes, or, putting that out there.
That the apostles and prophets having more kingdom focus, they're not really assigned to particular groups most of the time.
Right.
At least if they are, they're usually not for long term assigned to just particular groups. And that, as we started with in the beginning, the prophets really are meant to work with each other more than ever.
Yes.
So the next time we get together, we can talk about that. About how the prophets are supposed to work together.
Yes.
In teams.
Yes. So thank you for tuning in today, and we will be having more coming on this subject. We'll actually get more deep into the prophetic team build up, and Greg's gonna break that down more. And I just want to encourage anybody watching, it's okay to think outside the box. And I'm glad you are. Probably you already are, since you're watching. But I just pray that the Holy Spirit will continue to spur you on and bring people into your lives who will come alongside, and that this will organically begin to unfold, because that is what I've seen happen and happening. Is God is so faithful. When you give him your yes, get ready, because he'll run with that.